Had Portland Force 9 over on the hill just a stone's throw beyond that camera right there. Also breaking tonight, an update on the migrant situation in Aurora, Colorado, after police there detained several members of Trinidad Aragua. It's a gang from Venezuela, and that actually happened earlier this week. It was following a violent home invasion at an apartment complex in Aurora. Now, apparently some back and forth has happened between the mayors of Aurora and Denver, and we want to get an update on that from our correspondent out in the Los Angeles Bureau, Christina Coleman. Hey, Christina.
Hi, Kevin. Good evening. Aurora police now say that Trinidad Aragua gang members who allegedly kidnapped and tortured two people during the home invasion have been forcing the victims to pay them hundreds of dollars.
These suspects were basically extorting or taxing these individuals, and I'm sure they have been doing it to more individuals that live in and around that apartment complex. But they were basically extorting them every 2 weeks for $500 a month, where they would go there, knock on the door, say, hey, we want $500. They'd pay it, besides on top of paying the rent.
The home invasion happened in the very same apartment complex where the TDA gang members were caught on camera walking around boldly with guns and seen beating in a door. 8 of the 16 home invasion suspects in ICE custody are facing charges. The remainder are under investigation, and 3 suspects are still at large. Republican Aurora Mayor Mike Hoffman is blaming the migrant crisis in the city in part on Democratic Denver Mayor Mike Johnston. Hoffman said after initially agreeing to temporarily house some migrants from the sanctuary city of Denver, he started saying no to Johnston's request, at which point Mayor Kaufman says the Denver mayor worked with NGOs to house migrants in Aurora behind his back.
He won't tell me how many people he sent over here. He won't tell me what benefits he gave them, what promises he made. And so we're going through open records requests to get that information right now.
We reached out to the office of Denver's mayor for a response this evening. We're waiting to hear back. Kevin?
Christina, stay on that story for us. It is an important one. Christina Coleman and our West Coast Bureau, thank you so much. Now to Seattle, where residents are absolutely positively fed up with homelessness and drug use on their streets. In fact, one business owner there says he's constantly fending off drug addicts who disrespect the neighborhood where his salon is set to open next month, and he now plans to sue the city. Let's bring in that salon owner, Zazel Wu. Zazel, I just want to get your reaction first, and thank you for spending time with us here tonight. We certainly appreciate it, and I understand Seattle used to be such a great town. It still is a great city, but it's got its issues right now. I'm going to share a headline and get your reaction to this, Zazel. This is the headline. It says 50 Northeast Seattle businesses ask Mayor Harrell to address violent crime. It reads in part, please deploy additional police resources and otherwise restore public safety to our part of town. Please do more to end the reported gang and gun violence from our neighborhoods. Please help our community. That is straightforward. What say you?
I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for, but what I can tell you is that any large city is going to have a certain amount of crime. It's just a part of, a city. But for this particular area, close to the downtown area, the International District, Little Saigon, it's just become overwhelming. It's like it shouldn't be there. It hasn't been there before, but because of the fentanyl epidemic and the availability of meth, they feel the people that are using these drugs have this false sense of non-accountability. So they just think that they can go over here and have recreational drugs, do it out in the open, and they're taking advantage of the fact that the Seattle Police Department is understaffed and slightly underfunded. And the Seattle Police brothers and sisters in blue work very hard to try to secure the safety for everybody here in Seattle. And these people just, they come to the area because they know that they can freely participate in criminality.
Yeah, and that's always the challenge, Zazel. And I apologize, we have some breaking news on the Hill, so I'll have to cut the segment short. But I did want to hear your perspective, because I think you're right. I think the city needs to do a much better job to protect the citizens and small business owners like yourself, but also make an understanding for the people who see it from the outside of Seattle, that this is something that can be remedied if there is a commitment from leadership across the city and the state. Zazel Wu, I appreciate you spending time with us here on a Friday night. Best of luck to you and yours, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zazel. Appreciate you. Congressional lawmakers are so close, ever so close to averting a government shutdown tonight. Of course, we'll stay with it until the Senate takes care of their part of the business and check back in with the senior congressional correspondent, Chad Perkins. That's coming your way next. Chad, what can you tell us?
They're inching closer to getting to this roll call vote here, but they have this vote that they're on right now, and then probably the actual vote to fund the government and avoid a government shutdown. So they're probably about 2 votes away from this, and that means they're going to technically bleed past the deadline, but they're going to fund this. The government's going to be funded by 12:30, even though they didn't meet the mark. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, he indicated they would get this done before midnight. That's not the case, Kevin.
Will not be the case. 15 seconds rather left in this show. Maybe about 15 minutes or so before they hit the floor for that final vote. Chad, thank you, and we thank you for watching America's Late News. Fox News at night, back at midnight.
Is the 45th President of the United States. Now, he is America's 47th President, only the 2nd President in history to serve non-consecutive terms. So today, we announce this new Donald Trump $2 bill in color for just $19.95. Throughout his career, Donald Trump has always strived to be the best. He's become the most well-known public figure in the world. Now, as our 47th president, it is only fitting that he is honored on this magnificent commemorative $2 bill. National Collectors Mint has taken crisp, uncirculated U.S. legal tender $2 bills direct from sealed treasury packs. Then, our fine artisans precisely enhance them to commemorate this event, featuring a full-color rendering of President Trump right alongside the White House with his name, presidential signature, and his famous rallying cry, "Make America Great Again," appearing prominently on the face of each bill. The final issue price was to be set at $39. However, during this special release, this full-color commemorative $2 bill can be yours for only $19.95, protected by our 60-day money-back guarantee. Now, you can reserve your own 47th President Donald Trump $2 bill. There is a strict limit of 5 $2 bills per caller. Each full-color Trump $2 bill comes complete with a certificate of authenticity and a deluxe display portfolio. Reservations will be filled on a first-come, first-served basis, so the earliest orders will receive priority status over later ones. Due to rising demand, I urge you to take advantage of this opportunity now while these Trump collectible $2 bills are still available. But you must hurry. Don't delay. Avoid disappointment and future regret. Reserve yours today. Call now.
Call 1-800-446-4285. That's 1-800-446-4285. Strict limit of 5 bills per caller. So call 1-800-446.
Corkin for Trace Gallagher. The United States government is technically shut down at this very moment, but the Senate is ready to vote very soon to fix all that after the House earlier today passed a funding bill. Back to our congressional correspondent, the senior chief, the man who knows all, Chad Perkins. Hey, Chad.
Hey there, well, you're right. We are in a technical government shutdown right now, but I want to underscore here that this isn't going to affect federal workers in any adverse way. Services are not going to stop because the Senate is going to sync up with the House of Representatives sometime in about the next 30 or 40 minutes. The deadline here was 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. It just did not happen. The Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, he came to the floor not long ago and said, oh, we have an agreement, a time agreement in the Senate about considering some amendments and another bill, and then we'll get to the government funding portion here. He said, we'll get this done before the deadline. He was wrong. They are voting right now on a procedural amendment. There is then another amendment that's going to come up here shortly, or an actual vote on a Social Security bill. And then after that, they actually will have a short debate on the bill to avert a government shutdown, and then they will have the vote. So by my timing here, that's probably about 12:40, maybe a little bit later than that in the morning. They will need 60 votes to fund the government here and align with the House of Representatives. So there's not going to be drama in this vote in the next hour or so. There was certainly drama getting to this point to get a package that can get through the House and Senate. I mean, they had a 1,500-page bill that came out earlier in the week. They thought they were going to get the bill text last weekend. House Speaker Mike Johnson said he didn't want any drama this month. They did get a lot of drama here. So the only thing they have to do actually is to vote and sync up with the House of Representatives. And then everything will be status quo inside the federal government. This will fund the government through the 14th of March, Kevin.
Can you draw a parallel between what we're seeing here tonight, Chad, and something you've seen before in all your years on the Hill?
Yeah, there have been many versions, many different flavors of this. The fiscal cliff back in 2012, bleeding into 2013. There were a series of government shutdowns, and this is my kind of the way I was christened in Washington and covering Congress way back when in the mid-1990s. I worked for C-SPAN. There were a series of government shutdowns, partial government shutdowns from 1995, drifting all the way into early 1996. Now, in those days, they had 13 appropriations bills. They're down to 12 now. And when they would have these partial government shutdowns, they would go through and approve a couple more appropriations bills. But that was a long, protracted fight between then House Speaker Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, the President of the United States. It actually resulted in some deficit reduction and was a good thing. I mean, they kind of balanced the books by the end of the late 1990s there. This really doesn't balance the books. This just keeps the lights on. And this is a product of having very narrow margins in both the House and Senate. Remember, we had a government shutdown in the fall of 2013. This was over Obamacare. This is something where Ted Cruz, the Republican senator from Texas, went to the mat over that. We had the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, 35 days. And the reason that's different than the 1995-1996 affair is that those were partial shutdowns. They had portions of the federal government open through the period of October, November, December, even into early January. But what happened in 2019 into 2020 is that the full government shut down just before Christmas time, and it was 35 days. It took quite a while to get this recalibrated and get the votes to open things back up. What was the factor that kind of spurred them to do so is that air traffic controllers were saying they weren't going to come to work. There were some lawmakers who were very concerned, and the Trump administration at the time, that there might be danger in the skies because the pay period was coming up for federal workers and certainly air traffic controllers, and they didn't think that the things were going to be safe. And so after 35 days, the federal government reopened. Now, I'm looking at the floor right now. They have just finished this procedural vote here. This is a point of order on an unrelated bill by Mike Lee, the Republican senator from Utah. This is Tammy Baldwin, the Democratic senator from Wisconsin, in the chair. By my notes right now, they're going to go to a vote on another bill. Then they will go to that short debate where we'll hear from the leaders very briefly here, maybe even Mitch McConnell, maybe one of his last speeches as the minority leader. He gave his farewell address to the Senate earlier today, and certainly Chuck Schumer, and then we will get to that actual roll call vote. And actually, the reason I think this might go just a little bit faster right now, Kevin, than I thought a few minutes ago as I look off to the side here at the floor, is that they get everybody on the floor. Once you get everybody onto the floor, they can vote a little bit more quickly. It's 100 senators. They vote vocally. There's no electronic card. They either put their thumb up or down, or you hear them call the name and somebody hollers from the back of the chamber if they're a yay or a nay. So it's a little more organic the way they do that in the Senate compared to the House of Representatives, and sometimes it takes longer, even though there's fewer members, simply because it takes a long time to get everybody, all 100 people, in the room at the same time. Kevin?
Great stuff there, Chad. Thank you. We'll touch base with you again, and I'm hopeful that maybe we can get this wrapped up here sooner than later. And, of course, we'll check in with Chad over on the Hill in just a bit. Meantime, we want to also bring in Alexandria Hoff for more on what's been happening. And it's interesting, Alexandria, I want to know about the Trump administration's perspective on what's been happening on Capitol Hill. You've heard a lot of people talk about not just his influence, the president-elect specifically, but also that of a couple of his Doge leaders. Very interesting times here in Washington, Alex.
Yeah, certainly so, and for better or for worse, depending on who you ask when it comes to influence. And what we're hearing tonight from Team Trump and sources there is that he's actually not too pleased about the outcome in the House today, simply because it does not take up the issue of the debt ceiling. This was something that he was very adamant, the president-elect, that he wants this debt ceiling completely done away with, or at least extended through 2029. That did not happen today. But then when you had House Speaker Mike Johnson coming out after this vote, he said that the president-elect is very pleased. So there's some back and forth there. At this time, he is not expected to weigh in any further. But you had Democrats who, especially last night, were just really fired up, saying that the influence that he has over Congress and the influence of Elon Musk, for example, is just too large, that Congress is its own body. It's not supposed to be this interwoven with an upcoming president. At the same time, people were looking at the current White House, waiting for those lights to turn on there and have there be any interaction with President Biden and the situation that was unfolding. And that is President-elect Trump's main point, and it was his main point today, is that if this whole thing turned out to be a mess, that it really wasn't on the incoming administration, his administration, it's on the current one. It wasn't until the House was already voting that the White House finally issued some support for this legislation, Kevin. So it's been an interesting day of power dynamics. Who's calling the shots, who wants the shots to be called from somewhere outside the chamber, and it could be indicative of what we are going to see over the next 2 years, at least, when it comes to the House.
Let me ask you about that too, Alex. I think there are a number of people here in America who feel as if President Biden really has more or less quietly quit on the job. That may be an unfair characterization, but what I'm suggesting is he doesn't really seem to be helming a lot of this stuff. When people were talking about the drones, talking about somehow this wall buyback, the possible shutdown, we haven't seen him out there. Conversely, we've seen the president-elect really running, I'd say, running point on this, at least strategically. Is that your sense? Have you ever seen anything like this, I guess, is my question.
I think to your first point, what's really interesting is that if there was a president sitting back, maybe personally making the decision, I'm going to set my focus elsewhere right now in my final month in this office, that would be one thing. But you in that case would expect that their social media team or those around them would be pumping out at least some file pictures to say, like, here's what we're doing, focused on this and that. And that's just not happening. We had a Christmas photo tonight. There was something to do with the airport in San Diego, I believe, that was put out just a couple hours ago while this, legislation was being worked on, and that was from the president's Instagram account that I was looking on. So there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of hustle on that end to keep up appearances, is what I'm saying. And in the void of that, I think that President-elect Trump has simply been able to assume this position early in many ways, exactly a month out.
It's remarkable, and I've covered this town for a long time. I can't remember anything like this ever. And it'll only get more interesting as we get closer to the real inauguration and the next 4 years. Alex, stick around. Thank you so much. Meantime, we want to bring in Lindy Leeds, Anna Lowe-Desher, and Tom Fitton. They were joining us as we continue to watch the clock here, and the light is still on over there at the Capitol, so they're still hard at work. Tiana, your thoughts on what we've seen so far?
We have to remember that we're fighting over crumbs here. Effectively, until the Great Depression, all spending was discretionary. And now we've gone from 63% mandatory spending of the federal budget in just 2016 to now it's 70%. So we are fighting over the remaining 30% of that budget. So whenever we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars for this cancer treatment or this level of senators' security or Supreme Court salary, it's crumbs. And it's why it's an easy fight to take on. And it's why you can get Democrats or Republicans actually to kind of have some level of ease over it. And it's also why Donald Trump wants this fight to be past him. Because when he goes in for that TCJA extension and goes in for that border bill, he does not want to be fighting over keeping these literal lights on.
Yeah, and that's the real challenge for him coming up. Lindy, I know as a Democrat, you've had a unique experience, especially after this past campaign for the vice president. Sometimes the cash just sort of goes out the door. We have no idea where the money went. And yet, as we sit here tonight, $100 billion for disaster aid, that would seem like a Democrat priority. They seem happy about this. How do you think this will play in Peoria, as the kids used to say?
Kevin, it reminds me when Pelosi said we have to pass it to find out what's in it, right?
Yeah.
And I want to go back to what you just said earlier about President Biden quietly quitting. You said it's not fair, but I actually think it is. I think that was a completely accurate assessment because this is fundamentally dereliction of duty. He's incapable of stepping up, and honestly, this hurts to admit it, but he's been, I mean, where has he been? It's seriously a case of where's Waldo. And he clearly is incapable of being commander-in-chief, and then he endorsed someone who's also incapable of litigating the responsibilities that a commander-in-chief must assume. And it's just fundamentally not okay. And you have Karine Jean-Pierre saying that this is being quiet as her strategy? What? So it really comes down to they're not putting him out there because he simply cannot. He is physically and emotionally, cognitively unable to be the president. And the lights are off because he has no other choice.
Lindy makes a really strong point here, Tom. Keep this in mind. We're talking about a guy who's been in this town for decades, a master of shaking hands, making deals, and he should be out there, I would imagine, as the president, you'd be working the phones even at this late hour saying, are you all right? What can I do to help? And maybe that is being Pollyannish, and yet I'm wondering at this late stage, it looks like they're going to get the job done without him.
We had the Wall Street Journal report that the head of the Armed Services Committee, a Democrat, couldn't get in contact with President Biden to talk about the Afghanistan debacle. Why on earth would he be interested in talking to Congress about budget matters if he didn't want to talk about Americans being blown up in Afghanistan with the leaders of the Democratic Party? Biden's been out of it since before the election, so it's no surprise he isn't running the show here. I'm sure there are White House aides working with Schumer and such.
Sure.
But Joe Biden is prepping to go on vacation again to Italy under the guise of a state trip, and is going down to South America to visit the Amazon.
Yeah.
So we're watching a retirement in the presidency, literally.
Playing out in slow motion. I think Alex Hoff also hit it too. It just seems like it's remarkable, even now, that that is not happening. There's not even I would expect a photo. You know, here's the president on the phone. We're not even seeing that. I want to take you back over to the Hill. 13 minutes after the hour, Chad Pergram watching the floor for us. Chad, what do you know?
Well, we're still waiting for this next roll call vote, which will be the vote to keep the government open. But what is interesting here is the White House has put out a statement here that is from the Office of Management and Budget. And it basically says here that OMB has ceased shutdown preparations because there is a high degree of confidence that Congress will eminently pass the relevant appropriations and the president will sign the bill on Saturday. Because obligations of federal funds are incurred and tracked on a daily basis, agencies will not shut down and may continue their normal operations. So I talked earlier about the Office of Personnel Management not sending a note saying, hey, we're going to shut down. That was never going to happen. This is key right now. This is the Office of Management and Budget telling all the federal agencies that, hey, they got this bill through the House. There's not going to be a problem in the Senate. Yes, we're a little bit past that deadline, but guys, don't sweat it. And I know there's an awful lot of federal workers. In fact, I live, in the Washington, D.C. region. There are a lot of people calling me, federal workers, friends, others who I know, emailing, texting me today saying, hey, Chad, what do you know? And so there's high interest in determining whether or not there's going to be a shutdown. There's not. And this is the formal statement here from OMB, even though the Senate has not voted, and we still think that that vote will start sometime before 1 o'clock Eastern time, Kevin.
Chad, before I go back to my panel, if I can ask just a very quick question about Chuck Schumer. He seemed to be adamant that they should have gone back to the 1,500-plus page agreement that they had. This is obviously significantly skinnier, to use
Kevin, bear with me here for just 1 second, if I can interrupt.
Yeah.
They have just concluded that roll call vote. Okay, so if you look at the Senate floor here, this is Tammy Baldwin, the Democratic senator from Wisconsin, who's reading the vote tally on the unrelated bill that we weren't as concerned with here. This deals with Social Security. What's going to happen now, if you go to the floor, there's probably going to be a short debate. We're going to hear from Chuck Schumer here. Maybe we can listen in, and there he is. So let's listen in.
Tonight, the Senate delivers more good news for America. Tonight, the Senate delivers good news for America. There will be no government shutdown right before Christmas. This is a good bill. It'll keep the government open and funds and helps Americans affected by hurricanes and natural disasters, helps our farmers and avoid harmful cuts. Your order, please.
The Senate will be in order.
After a chaotic few days in the House, it's good news that the bipartisan approach in the end prevailed. It's a good lesson for next year. Both sides have to work together. But by dealing with people who've had trouble with disasters, by helping our farmers avoiding harmful cuts, this is a good bill. And I'm glad we're passing it. I thank my Republican colleagues for working with us to move this bill quickly through the Senate. It's a good outcome for America and the American people. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to the consideration of H.R. 10545, which the clerk will report.
H.R. 10545, an act making further continuing appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2025, and for other purposes.
There will now be up to 30 minutes for debate, equally divided.
Madam President.
The senior senator from Washington.
Madam President, I will not use 15 minutes, but I do want to just let our colleagues know that I am very pleased.
So what they're doing right now on the Senate floor is this is a short debate. They said there's up to 30 minutes of debate, and this is Patty Murray, the Democratic senator from Washington State. She is the chair of the Appropriations Committee. They control the purse strings here. You might also hear from Susan Collins, the Republican senator from Maine. She is in charge on the Republican side. She's the ranking minority member on that committee, and they're going to have this short debate kind of extolling the virtues of this bill and avoiding a government shutdown, even though they got past the midnight deadline here. But then they will get to the actual vote, and we should be able to tell pretty quickly just how fast that vote's going to go, because everybody wants to get out of here. They do need 60 votes in this case to pass this bill. We don't think that that's in question. Keep in mind that the House of Representatives got 366 votes earlier today. So this vote, when they go to it, is probably going to score probably in the 80s, I would think, 80 out of 100 senators, give or take. But it's going to be an overwhelming vote. And again, there's not going to be a government shutdown, and the White House has indicated in the past 10 minutes here that President Biden will sign the bill on Saturday. Kevin?
Chad, thank you. We'll keep an eye on it. Appreciate your time tonight, and obviously staying up late with us. And not just that, he always helps us understand what's happening. He's the very best at that. Tiana, let me ask you, as you see them push this boulder over the finish line, your thoughts?
It's, first of all, notable that Biden will not be signing it tonight, but more importantly, there's such little attention paid to the Social Security bill that they're voting on before, and quite frankly, it's much more important because they are raiding that mandatory spending package. Any reconciliation bill through the Byrd rule cannot be touched.
That's right.
Social Security cannot be touched.
That's right.
It's only through these massive votes that you can raid Social Security in order to pay pension-funded union federal workers and further incentivize and increase that insolvency date.
And that's what's interesting, and not to dive into inside baseball too much or PBGC wanting to get into the rescue, these things usually happen under cover of night. In these massive omnibuses, and yet now we're starting to learn more, and I think people are wising up to
Maybe
this.
that's the magic of Doge.
Maybe so, and that's what I'm really hopeful
Thank you,
for.
Elon.
Thank you, absolutely. We've got about 2.5 minutes to go. Tom, I'm going to get you in, and then Lydia, your thoughts. Go ahead.
You know, Wednesday was an important day in many respects. It showed the consequences of the election. I was in meetings on Wednesday morning. Everyone I heard was unhappy. The Republican caucus across the board was unhappy with what Mike Johnson had planned. In the afternoon, we were all told it's, done deal effectively. We may be unhappy, but they're going to do what they typically do, is that a group of Republicans will vote with Democrats to pass something that most Republican voters would object to. Except Elon Musk, President Trump, and voters had access to Twitter and social media, and blew all that up.
Yeah.
And I don't think that would have happened prior to the election. Remember, Republicans promised to stop this type of activity at the in order to retain power.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we have a less bad bill, something I still object to,
Yeah.
but it would have been a lot worse but for the consequences of the election.
I think Tom makes a great point, Lindy, and we've got about a minute or so to go. His point being, without X, for example, I mean, we could back time this all the way to when Elon Musk purchased X. But for that purchase, could we crowdsource the way we've been able to find out what's in it? You know, again, going back to that Pelosi point. Your thoughts, Lindy, on what's happened here tonight?
Kevin, unlike Democrats, I'm not going to pre-hate everything that the Trump administration has done. This was successful. His transition has been a tremendous success. And Democrats need to acknowledge that. They can't just automatically or instinctively oppose and undermine every single one of his efforts. And you know what? The mission of DOGE is something that we should all herald and support. Fiscal responsibility is something we should all aspire to. This is not a partisan thing. This is an American thing. So I wish President Trump the best. As a Democrat, I sincerely do. And why? It's because I love our country. And that's an attitude that all of us should adopt.
Well, can I get an amen from the choir? Let's amen to that. Let's go back over to Chad Pergram. Chad has been watching everything happen for us here tonight. I want to give you an opportunity before we wrap up here, Chad. I know that it looks like this is a done deal and could be wrapped up here fairly shortly. What can you tell us?
Well, Susan Collins, the Republican senator from Maine, is talking right now. She is the ranking Republican on the Appropriations Committee. They're in charge of spending the money here and allocating where it goes. So this is basically their bill, this interim spending agreement here. We might hear from a couple of other senators, but I'll tell you, the jet fumes are starting to go through the building right now. People want to get to the airport, want to get home for Christmas, come back to hit things on January 2nd, January 3rd when the new Congress starts. So again, that roll call vote will start probably, I would say, again, they allotted 30 minutes. Now, that doesn't mean much in the Senate. They'll take the amount of time that they need. It's probably going to start no later than, I would say, 12:45. In fact, Schumer is up right now. He might yield to some others. Then they'll have the vote, and then this will be wrapped up probably by 1 o'clock Eastern time, Kevin.
Let me ask you about that. So if I'm understanding...
Hold on one more second here.
Yeah, go ahead.
This might be okay, they might be starting the vote right now here, Tammy Baldwin. If I can hear the floor.
No, he's right. It does look like that. Yes.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the roll call vote here. As soon as, yes, so this is the roll call vote. All right, Kevin, this is the vote itself on funding the government. They started about 24 minutes late, but they'll wrap this up here and we'll have a conclusion very soon. This is the vote on funding the government.
Yeah, you figure, look, it's going to be 80 to 20, maybe even more than that. Everybody, like you said, Chad, wants to get home. Chad Pergram, always a pleasure, my friend. You're the best. Thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. And thank you also to our panel. We appreciate all of you on a Friday. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to all of you. And we thank you at home for watching America's Late News, Fox News at Night. I'm Kevin Cork in Washington, and for Trace Gallagher, have a wonderful Christmas. We hope to see you back here Monday. Have a good weekend.
Morning as Congress voting to keep the government open right now, at least for now. Moments ago, the Senate began passing a stopgap funding bill. It comes just hours after the same measure passed in the House in a narrow vote. The bill will then head to President Biden's desk to be signed into law later today. The president has indicated he supports this bill. The government did technically shut down after midnight when the Senate ran out of time as they were preparing to cast their votes. The plan includes disaster relief and farming provisions. It, however, does not include a suspension of the debt limit, something President-elect Trump has been pressuring Republicans to address. The plan also extends the government funding deadline to March 14th of next year, and this all comes after several chaotic days on Capitol Hill as lawmakers scrambled to chart a path forward before this morning's deadline. And there in the thick of it all is Chad Pergram, Fox News senior congressional correspondent. Chad, what's the latest?
Chanley, good morning. Well, this vote is still open to fund the government, for the Senate to align with the House of Representatives on this government funding bill, but I can tell you that they have enough votes to pass the bill. Nothing is final until they gavel it down. This is Tammy Baldwin, the Democratic senator from Wisconsin, who is presiding right now. That will be the finality of this vote here. But the fact that they've crossed that threshold, they needed 60 votes to pass this bill, and they are above that level right now. So this is going to pass. Yes, they missed the deadline. It was 12 o'clock Eastern time here, but this is going to pass and go to President Biden. The White House has indicated that he will sign this tomorrow. And just the fact that they missed that deadline, it really doesn't mean much because, again, the government did not shut down. It was, figured out this afternoon once the House recorded 366 yeas in favor of this bill that the government was not going to shut down. It was just kind of a fait accompli before it got to the Senate, Chanley.
That's right. Now, Chad, remind those watching how we got here, because it has been a couple of days of just back and forth, a couple of proposals that failed, the House voting against one yesterday. Walk us through how we finally get here tonight.
Well, it was an original 1,500-page bill that House Speaker Mike Johnson put out. We got it Tuesday, and there were all sorts of things that members, frankly, from both sides of the aisle soured on. There was a congressional pay raise in that bill. There were provisions that some people thought were quite necessary, full funding to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. There was disaster relief, $110 billion, which is a staggering figure to address the hurricanes in Florida and also in North Carolina. Also the wildfires in Maui from last year, and that was eventually taken out in this bill because that bill just could not pass. So what House Speaker Mike Johnson did once President-elect Trump kind of expressed his displeasure in this bill, he wanted an increase in the debt ceiling because that's something he's going to have to probably wrestle with in the first quarter of the year. He got into this, and Elon Musk started to absolutely trash this bill on X, and a lot of Republican members in particular ran for the exit. So what Mike Johnson did is he put together a skinnier bill, and that bill only got 174 votes. They couldn't even get a simple majority in the House of Representatives. There were 38 Republicans who voted no. So they went back to the drawing board again, right up against the deadline, and they got 366 votes there today. We don't know the final vote total on this bill right now in the Senate, but as we indicate, it's well above 60 votes, and that's why it's going to pass in the next 15 or 20 minutes here, and the government will not shut down, Shannon.
Yeah, better late than never there on that, Chad. But as far as moving forward, what does this indicate, especially the last couple of days, for Speaker Mike Johnson and his future as Speaker of the House?
Well, this has been a rocky period for him. He thought he had his ducks in a row. He did not. He probably did not help affairs once Musk and President-elect Trump got involved. President-elect Trump and Mike Johnson, they went to the Army-Navy football game last week, and people thought that, this bill had been socialized, and the President-elect had really not said much about it. People thought that everybody was on the same page. We never got the bill text, over the weekend. What people have been saying, Corey Mills, a Republican from Florida, a few others have started to indicate that they really have reservations about Mike Johnson. Andy Harris, he's a Republican congressman from Maryland, the Eastern Shore, and he has indicated that he might not support Mike Johnson here. That's a powerful voice, and the conservative wing of that conference put out a statement today that he's kind of undecided. And what they have to do, Chanley, on January 3rd, that's when the new Congress starts, is they have to elect a speaker first. And if you do not elect a speaker, the House of Representatives can do nothing. Absolutely nothing. They can't even swear in the new members. And that's why when you go back to 2023, where they took 15 votes, the longest speaker's vote since the late 1850s, over 5 days before they elected Kevin McCarthy. And what that did was it kind of stymied the start of the Congress passing bills. You can't do any of those things. And right now it appears that they are closing this vote here. So this is in fact done in the Senate. But again, that's going to be a problem for Mike Johnson because they're going to have that narrow majority in the House. One vote is all he can lose in the early part of the year, especially on that speaker's vote, and that doesn't, portend good things for him.
That's right. Do we want to take a second and listen in? Let's listen in for a second as the vote has now officially passed. And of course, Chad, they stopped talking. talking as we were going to listen in there. But what
Yeah,
happens
that's
now,
Tim
Chad,
Kaine,
on the floor?
the Democratic. That's Tim Kaine, the Democratic senator from Virginia, who's presiding. He had just read the vote total. The final vote there was 85 to 11. 85 yeas, 11 nays, and that's kind of the ballpark that we thought it was going to be in. What Tim Kaine is doing, they're running through a lot of basic paperwork now. You see this at the end of a session day in the Senate, and there's probably going to go on, frankly, for about another hour. Stuff that we're not going to be too interested in, and probably bore people a little bit because a lot of it's administrative, especially at the end of a session like this. And this is the last vote of the Congress, frankly. So this isn't going to be as important right now, but they have passed that bill. I want to flag one thing that's interesting that doesn't have anything to do directly with the Senate, but with the House. And because I talk about the end of the Congress, we were told, and I was able to report earlier this week on Tuesday, confirming this report, that the House Ethics Committee was going to release its report on Matt Gaetz, the former congressman from Florida who resigned and was up briefly to be the Attorney General nominee, about his conduct. And what we had confirmed is that the House Ethics Committee was going to release that ethics study on Gaetz's conduct when he was a member after the final vote in the House of this Congress. We believe that has certainly happened. That was the final vote in the House earlier this evening in the 6 o'clock hour. So now we wait. Does that come out later tonight? Does it come out next week, Christmas Eve? It would have to come out before the end of this Congress, but that's one bit of untidy work that they have to deal with, and there will be a lot of interested parties to see what's in that Ethics Committee report, Shannon.
Oh, absolutely. Astute point there. We'll be on the lookout for that. As far as the bill tonight passing, what do you think really brought it over the edge as far as getting it through the House, now the Senate? Who are the winners and losers, if you will, as of right now?
Well, the winners right now are certainly the people who needed the disaster relief. I talked about in Maui from a long time ago. There were tornadoes in the Midwest, but obviously the most attention from the dual hurricanes of Helene and Milton in the fall in North Carolina, just utter devastation in some of those areas. Yes, that's a big dollar figure, but that money needed to go out the door. What that does is it reloads FEMA's coffers to respond for immediate needs. In other words, if there's another set of natural disasters, earthquakes or big blizzards or something this winter, they have enough money and they can respond immediately. The other thing that it does, it allows a lot of these property owners, business owners to rebuild, fix roads, all of that type of infrastructure. That's going to be key in this. And then the other part of this is the Small Business Administration was unable to put money out the door to help you rebuild your cafe or your gun shop or whatever it is that you ran if you were devastated by the storms and the flooding down there. So they could process the claims, they just couldn't send you a check. That was in abeyance really since the end of September. I mean, the SBA said they just didn't have the money. They said, we'll take the claims. So those are definitely the biggest winners right now. And the other big winners certainly are the federal workers, the federal workforce, because the government did not shut down at the holidays.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, we look forward to March 14th, right, Chad? What needs to happen between now and then?
Well, keep in mind that these funding bills, there's 12 that run the federal government, were supposed to be done on the 30th of September. We are into fiscal year 2025 right now, and here you're going to be, well into, the calendar year 2025, and starting to work on the fiscal year spending bills for 2026, which starts in October of next year. You see how this is how the planes get backed up at LaGuardia here. This is the problem. So they have to fund all of these things and figure out what they can do. The important thing to know is that these are basically Democratic funding levels. The Democrats, or at least some Democratic influence. President Biden is still in the White House, so he was able to put his stamp on these bills. That's where some Republicans were saying, hey, let's try to get as many wins out of this as we can. So the Democratic wins continue at least for a while. However, there is an asterisk next to that. The military gets the most money from Congress. This is what we call discretionary spending, where they're about 52 to 55% of all money that Congress spends. Well, if your money is flat for 6 months, from October of this past fall into March, and you're the military, that really puts them behind the 8 ball because, they get the most money from Congress. And you had Adam Smith, the Democratic representative from Washington State, who's the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, talking about these so-called CRs. You hear that abbreviation all the time, Shanley. It's short for continuing resolution because it continues the funding at the current level. There's no new funding. And so that really puts the screws to the military. And so they're a loser in this, the fact that they're operating on a continued budget from the last fiscal year rather than new money in the new year. And this also spells problems. How are they going to fund the government in March? It's going to be Republicans with the Senate, Republicans with the House, President-elect Trump in the White House. How do they solve this come springtime?
Exactly. And will it come down to the wire like it did tonight, Chad? In your experience, will we have this last-minute overnight special with you in March?
I will probably be here. We will probably be talking in March. That's usually the way these things go. Absolutely. I might not talk to you until then, but I'll put it on my calendar. We'll be here, March 14th.
That's right. And so for those just joining, again, the Senate passing this bill to fund the government, 85-11 there, Chad. And we had about 37 or so minutes of a technical shutdown. What does that mean, if anything?
It just shows that they just couldn't get their act together in time, and why, this deadline, funding that we go through every cycle, it's repeated. There's a reason why they made the deadline December 20th. Why? Because they knew that everybody wanted to get home for Christmas. It's one of the rare times that they actually do get out on time to go home and spend some time with the families. The new Congress starts immediately on the 3rd of January. So, this period is kind of hallowed, just not for religious purposes, but for families, members of Congress, et cetera, to go home or do whatever they need to do to take that break. There's a reason why they kind of put that deadline there. And you talk to some of the conservatives, you talk to Mike Lee, a Republican from Utah, you talk to Warren Davidson, a Republican from Ohio. They say that it's kind of insidious that they always do this deadline because they're like, okay, here's this bill. You got to vote for it or we're going to be stuck here over the holidays, and it's take it or leave it. And that's precisely why, in this case, the 1,500-page bill blew up just a couple of days ago.
Exactly. Are we hearing anything from either side, the White House or President-elect Trump's team, now that this is officially past this stage?
I'm going to look on my phone here because, like I said, I've been on the air here and I've not seen anything definitive. We were told that the president-elect was okay with this. President Biden, as has been well reported, has been kind of underground and not really saying much of anything other than that statement from the Office of Management and Budget that he would sign the bill on Saturday.
Well, Chad, we are approaching the commercial break in a couple of minutes, but I want to give you an opportunity for your final thoughts and your plethora of experience, how maybe this compares to the prior down-to-the-wire votes that you covered, and how we reached where we are.
Yeah, we've been through worse, frankly. This was not as bad. We had a similar situation a couple of years ago where they had that technical shutdown. They got just a couple of minutes. I was standing right in the same place in the Senate when they got a few minutes past midnight. So, yes, there was a shutdown, but nobody really cared. In the same instance here. The really epic ones were the big shutdown in 2019 that went into 2020, 35 days. And I talked about the combination of shutdowns in 1995 and into 1996, and that's kind of when some of these big government shutdowns became in vogue. We really didn't talk much about them. That's when they really started and became politically dangerous, frankly.
Chad Pergram there on the Hill. Thank you so much for staying up late, or I guess early morning, with me tonight. We appreciate your insight so much. We'll let you go.
We'll see you in March, Chandler.
I hope you get some sleep, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you, my friend. And you at home, if you're just joining us, crisis averted. Congress has voted to keep the government open, at least for now. Moments ago, the Senate passing that stopgap funding bill that Chad was just talking about. It comes hours after the same measure passed in the House in a narrow vote. So the bill now heads to President Biden's desk in the morning or later today to be signed into law. Stay with Fox News for all the latest on this and much more. But now back to regular programming already in progress.